Welcome to the 5th episode of the OpenScore Conversations podcast. Today we have the multi-passionate pianist Chris Au. It is rare to meet someone like Chris who has so much enthusiasm and energy for life. He doesn't let anything get in the way of his pursuits and enjoys bringing people along with him. He is a positive, resilient musician who is bursting at the seams with ideas on sharing classical music and making it accessible for everyone. In this podcast, you'll get a taste of Chris's passion towards using social media to leverage his career and his love for sharing classical music. We explore the challenges and the process of being a multi-passionate creative, how he healthily manages his time to be productive, advice he would give his younger conservatory self, and much more. Thank you very much, Chris, for your generosity with your time and your experiences. Let's begin with diving in on how deeply we want to give ourselves permission to be invested in the benefits of social media. I hope you enjoy.
There are some people who are really successful on social media, particularly like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and they go all in. And by that, I mean, like, I've been listening to Mr. Beast on a podcast talk about how he obsessed over YouTube. He basically did nothing but YouTube. But even before that, he's like he just obsessed over it, and I'm curious to know whether we should obsess over it. Like people like you and me who believe in the power of social media and using this platform as a way to connect with audiences and actually get our personal brand out there, but potentially make such a big revolutionary change. I mean, you have people like two-set violin who are already like honed into that. But I think in terms of piano, there's always this sort of, it's a bit harder because with piano, you want to be in the glory of like people like Yuja and Daniel Trivanov and Kissin, and in order to go there, you need to go all in into piano and do nothing else, basically. And so there's like kind of disjunct of like, okay, I want to make sure I play really well and at the top of my level, but I also like feel like I believe in the social media thing. And so I wonder like, how do you balance that? And if someone were to say, I'm going to go all in on social media, I'm just going to do nothing but YouTube. I'm going to practice, obviously, but do nothing but YouTube for the next like 5 years and hone in on that and find a niche for myself. Do you think that's a good idea or not?
Okay, I'm gonna give you two very almost black and white type of stuff in my opinion, because I think there's just so many options. As I was speaking with someone else, social media, it's so early on, especially in the context of classical music, it's literally the Wild West. You can do anything. It's like the gold rush. You can find that gold, you mine it, and you go for it. So I think, yes, you can. There isn't anyone out there aside from yourself to say that, you know, you can't have the same quality of playing as the top tier echelons of performers and still have an Instagram. You have Ray Chen out there. You have, you know, Yuja Wang doing it in her version, which is really just for like marketing and publicity and stuff. But who's to say that that's not social media? Like, yeah. if she decided, hey, I want to do social media, maybe I'll just get on some stories, and once a week I'll just like say something about my life, and even then that would be like, oh, she's like, you know, in the social media world now. And I think it's very different for everybody. Yeah. So yes, there can be a healthy balance. Number two, I feel very honored that you think that I like have good level of playing and I have everything all under control, because that is not the case at all.
Well, we all have our own varying levels. Yeah, we all have our own varying levels. Yeah.
Yeah. And then number three, I think, yes, you do have to be obsessed with social media for a lot of reasons. Number one is because social media is a 24/7 thing if you want to go far in it. Because it's not just about, you know, I post something. It's about the pre-planning. What's your image? What's your branding? What are you going to post? When are you going to post? Because sooner, at some point in your journey, you're going to be all about those vanity metrics. And then you're going to attach your vanity to it, and you're going to be thinking about, okay, stats, when am I supposed to post them? When can I do that? Now maybe I can get some sponsorships. And you do all this stuff and you post, but you also can't forget that this is social media. You have to do community building. And social media is on 24/7. So you are also on 24/7. Plus, as a creative, You're thinking 24/7. You're like, what videos am I gonna make? Can I make this for a video? Oh, I'm doing something about fingering here. Maybe I can turn that into a video. It can be a how-to video. And then the how-to video is like, how do I repurpose this for Instagram? How do I repurpose this for stories, for TikTok, for YouTube? Oh, I have a short. If it's short, what if I go in depth? And now this can be a little teaser for the YouTube long form video. And if I have a long form, oh, let's do behind the scenes and turn this into Patreon. It's hard not to be obsessed.
You're speaking my language there. Like, it's like there's so much. No, I really relate to this and that's why I'm asking you this question, because it's like there are people who kind of I guess a lot of them are in school, and so they kind of they do it part-time. But then you have people like Harp, I think her name is Kristen, and she does Harp Talk, right? And she's on TikTok and Harp. She got invited to Jimmy Fallon, and like she went all in. And she got super successful on TikTok, and she's like didn't have management, wasn't with an agent or anything. Like she just did that. And then you have people like Narration, who also just started composing, experimenting, and then she expanded, and then she became really good at video editing, and she just kept exploring things. And she is so successful on YouTube, I think, because she integrates pop culture with classical music. And she does it so well and with such kind of humility that it becomes something very relatable. And yet people are like, wow, she can play so well as well. And so there's that incredible fusion. It's where I want to be at, where like I feel like I'm not sacrificing my artistic and playing ability, but I'm exploring things in such a my own way that it's respectable. I think one of the tendencies and temptations for people, especially in social media, is to go into a very, and this is each their own, but into a very they kind of simplify our art, and they play only the very kind of popular things, or they only do that, and they kind of sacrifice the beauty of what's available in not just harmony and rhythm, but they just sort of like play the easier stuff to appeal and get the audience. And it's like that, there's a really fine line between, you can do that very tastefully and still exhibit an incredible high level of playing, or you can do that kind of in a way that cheapens it. And it's very hard to draw that balance. I think everyone would draw that line very differently. But I really admire people like Narration and Kristen, who just really find that beautiful way that they can express themselves and yet speak to an audience, build community, like you said, and not sacrifice any of their artistic integrity. Like they could probably, like Kristen could probably get a harp job, an audition for a harp gig, or Narration could probably get an agency and perform worldwide and develop her own repertoire and programming that's equally respectable. So it's like really cool how that's a possibility, but it's so it takes so much time, I think, to really discover your true voice, like what it is that you can say, or what it is that who you are, and how you can express that online so that people can actually see that. It's such a journey, such a process.
Because you mentioned about finding your true voice through social media in a way. I think sometimes people go at it a little bit backwards, and it becomes unhealthy. Now, what I'm going to say is going to also require some mindful healthiness to it. But I find sometimes when people want to go and have, the stardom, so to speak, that Narration has, or the ones that we do look up to, we think, we need to get, we need to have certain production quality, we need to have a certain amount of followers, whatever, and we follow the end goal. And then we equate that with being, they reached this point, they're so authentically themselves, they saw their voice, and they found it. It's not because they have 31,000 followers that they found their voice.
Yeah.
Social media, to me anyways, and how I look at it in order to keep me semi-sane, is a playground for your authenticity. They were authentic from the start, and then people found them, and they stayed authentic. And because of that, the energy of authenticity travels so far and so deep that no matter what you make, you're going to feel like to the viewers that you are relatable, because you are you. You're not trying to be the next TikTok viral video. So I tend to use social media in the sense of like, this is who I am, this is who I'm trying to discover, and that I'm trying to grow into. I like education to an extent. And so when I have those inspirations of wanting to do education, because in that moment that is authentically part of who I am, I'm going to put that out. Oh, today I feel like, I need to work and brush up on some of my piano skills because I want to have a certain level. That is still authentically me. And if you stay true to that and you use social media as your way of finding your authenticity of who you are, your playground in that, and don't waver, the people will come and find you, hands down. And look, we're creatives. We're already going to be unique, that we're not going to be like someone else. Sooner or later, people will find you and you will find your tribe and grow from there.
I like that a lot. I think it's really tricky sometimes. I mean, everybody has a different journey and process with this, but for myself personally, I think a lot of the time with social media, you're like just finding good ideas out there and kind of copying it, but using putting in your own twist to it, at least initially. I mean, obviously, when you're starting off, like Instagram back in the days, like just posting pictures. So you're like, oh, that's a pretty photo. Let me see if I can do something similar. All right. And you're like, oh, sunset. Obviously, everyone thinks the sunset's beautiful. So I'll take a picture of a sunset. And then it morphs into like, oh, there's these certain videos, there's IGTV, there's stories, and people start using stories as a way to communicate and to speak face to face with their audience and build community. So you're like, oh, I'll try that. Perhaps you want to share what other activities you're doing that you don't want to post on your normal feed, and that becomes, something else you do. I think for me, it was a lot of copying and trying that, and then adding my own twist to it. And then it morphs slowly into, oh, I really like doing this thing. And this really, like, oh, this is really fun. But also, I could develop something from this. And it was also a process of discovering, and this is sort of advice I'd give to anybody who's getting into social media, is just post things where you're at. Don't feel like you need to have crazy production, crazy editing skills in order to get started. Because as you're producing consistently or somewhat consistently, every time you do it, you're going to fine tune something. There's always going to be something that you do a little bit more efficiently. Like even if you keep everything the same, you might do something more efficiently the next time. So editing could be smoother. So you reduce the time that it takes you to edit, a video. Or you're like, oh, I don't really like this microphone. It gives that there's a buzzing sound, or it's too close. I'll put it further away or get a new microphone. And just the act of doing that already gonna give you an improvement. And you keep doing that, and then like next week or 2 weeks later, oh, maybe I have a little bit of spare cash to invest in some ring lights or something else to help the lighting. Or I could get like some really nice, like not Christmas lights, but those kind of lights that go around, like around the piano.
Fairy
and
lights.
Fairy lights, exactly. And it's like, oh, that will make it look really pretty and add a little different vibe to it. Or you could be like, oh, actually, I'm more than happy to, get a subscription to Canva or something in order to facilitate something else I want to improve. And I think through that process, you actually develop a lot as you go. And it's really cool to see that transformation. And the important thing is that people want to see that transformation. People out there want to see that process. And then it becomes something that not only are you proud of because you have a portfolio of things you're constantly producing, but people can go through your profile and say, wow, this guy can do this, do that. That's really cool. He has all these different interests. I actually want to follow him and see what else he produces that might be relevant to me or just could be cool for me to see.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And is that not the process of having an authentic playground?
Yeah.
You finding yourself. That's all about it. And I love the fact that you said that, produce where you're at. Because if you don't, you're going to discourage yourself and you're not going to be able to find your true authentic voice or whatever and make your profile your own personal community and your own personal place for you to play in, that it's a safe space. And I think when you look at it that way, you're making, little increments of steps of what can you improve? What can I do differently? Oh, I seem to really be attracted to this. I want to do more of that. How can you not become obsessed?
Well, yeah, no,
especially as a creative. That's the creative obsessive process all the time.
Oh, it's so hard being a creative. And I think a lot of people underestimate what it means to be creative and to have that creative mind, because it's almost like there's I don't know if you feel this too, but I often feel option paralysis. And it's like, as a creative, you can do so many things, which is so great because, like you said, there's a playground for you to play on. And then there's like on the other end, it's like people who follow you probably want to follow you for just the one or two things that you do. But yet you can do so much. And how do you find time? I think it's actually, it's simpler to just tell somebody to say, okay, you're creative, great. Can you just focus on playing piano and performing these concerts and doing this and be done with it? Okay. But once you start saying, okay, can you teach? Can you do some collaborative piano? Can you do some composition? Can you show us some improv that you do? And if all these things are like, yeah, I could do that. Yeah, I could do that. And then could you also create, instructional videos? Could you also do all these other things? Then you start to become paralyzed because there's so much you can do. And as a result, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to sacrifice something. And people like Mr. Beast or big influencers out there, sometimes they sacrifice relationships. Sometimes they sacrifice social life. Sometimes they sacrifice their health. And so as a creative, it's actually really tricky to decide what to do. And I think that's why school becomes such a safe haven for a lot of artists. And I'm speaking just in the classical realm and more particularly pianists. Because I don't think string players or woodwind players kind of like want to stay and do their doctorate like as a given, but pianists always feel like they have to just stay and finish their doctorate and then maybe do a postgrad something before they like, come out of the nest into the real world. And I think it's because there's so many things that you could do as a pianist.
Also, instrumentalists, you guys have a lot of things to do too.
You do.
Just putting that out there.
Like orchestral auditions and everything.
We're not saying you've got less stuff to do. But
I'm just speaking as a pianist. Yes, speaking as a pianist. And I think school gives you this idea that you can stick to doing assignments, get your thesis done, you practice, go to lessons, and people tell you what to play for chamber music generally. And if you're doing like a thesis on Beethoven, you're going to be playing Beethoven. So it's kind of like your options are limited, and it's safer that way. I don't know.
There's also nothing wrong with that if that's what you vibe with. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some people just want to go there. I want to go deeply into Beethoven. This is my life. This is what I personally obsess over.
Yeah.
You do you. I think for people like us, when we're in this social media world and we do have interests outside of, let's just say, Beethoven, for example, there's nothing wrong with having multiple interests and having multiple talents and wanting to create more. Yes, you get the like option paralysis, which I also heavily suffer from. So I have a question for you. How do you get yourself, if you have a method, out of that option paralysis? How do you restrict your limits if you feel you need to? Because within the restriction of limits, you will also find more creativity.
It's definitely a process. So I went on one extreme where, okay, I'm going to maximize my day. I'm going to do, all these things. And like I'll get up at 6 a.m. I'll start like mental practicing because I don't want to wake up my family. So I'll do that. I'll go for a walk so I can get more ideas in my head. Then I'll write. Then I'll spend some time like meditating, doing yoga, exercise. Then like 9 a.m. is practice, right? And then I'm gonna rest a little bit, but then I'm gonna go right into like all these different things. I'll record a podcast here. Then I do this, and I make content. I'll edit. Then after dinner, I'm back to practicing, and like trying to maximize the day. And it sounds really good in theory because you're like, if I can be consistent with this, I can produce a lot and I feel like I'm being productive. The reality is, at least for me, that it's really hard to do that. And a lot of the time it's impossible because the problem with that, setting yourself that goal, is that when you feel burnt out the next day or whenever, like usually it's the next day, you do that for one day, the next day you're like, I can't move. I can't. And then you start scrolling, you start procrastinating, and then it builds up the guilt of not following through with a plan that you really wanted to follow through with because you believed that was the ultimate like way in which you could be productive and have purpose as a human being. That guilt starts to build up, and so you're like gonna distract yourself and escape from that in order to distract yourself from the guilt, except the guilt's not running away, it's still there. So eventually you have to face it. It becomes really mentally exhausting and physically exhausting
and very overwhelming
because you feel like you've betrayed yourself, you feel like you've sabotaged yourself, and and I think ultimately that's not being honest and truthful to who you are as a human being. And so I've been exploring this a lot. I read this book called Rest. I don't have it here. But yeah, it explores what really high functioning, peak performance scientists, artists, politicians, and their process. And they've kind of come up with different studies and their own anecdotes that you can probably be productive about 4 hours a day, like really productive. The rest of it's like, doing errands, like emailing, writing letters, and even then it's like light stuff. Like you look at
But there's like a window of 4 to 5 hours that you are like peak. You can squish it all in. Yeah, your optimal time. It's different for everybody.
Where you can focus. Yeah. And so you have to ask yourself the question, what should I be doing in those 3 to 4 hours? And sometimes it's like, recording a podcast like we're doing right now. And those are like important hours that you dedicate to certain things so you can be at your best. Sometimes it's editing. Sometimes it's coming up with ideas. Sometimes it's practicing. Sometimes it's teaching. Sometimes it's not teaching and, come up with instructional videos or editing or things that, you do a lot of. And so you have to dedicate that time knowing that you need those 3 to 4 hours. That because you want to be consistent, 3 to 4 hours, 4 to 5 that's it. That's literally it. And the rest of the time, you should rest. And the thing is, with rest, you're not actually totally resting either because your brain is constantly thinking. Your mind is still at work. So you take a nap, you think you're resting, you're maybe physically resting, but your mind is still kind of running through what you did before, kind of consolidating different things, putting pieces of the puzzle together as you're sleeping. And if you're doing exercise or you're doing some other activity that, like, let's say you're really into pottery, as you're doing pottery, your brain might also be drifting back into like the piece that you were just learning on the piano and like, oh, that's really cool. And and I think of cooking for me as that sort of process. Like I'm cooking or doing dishes, my mind's wandering and like I'm doing other things. Like I know what I need to do, but my mind's going elsewhere. And so you need to allow yourself that freedom because then some of the great ideas flow. I don't have the answer to your question. I think it's about knowing that you have limitations, drawing those boundaries really well for yourself, knowing that you want to be consistent. That 6 days of consistent work is going always to be better than like 2 days of like 8 hours, like high performance, and then 3 days of like low energy. It's always better to have those 6 days of like really good stuff happening. And then with options, I find writing is really important for me because writing allows you to physically put down on paper and to almost psychologically release that built up energy within yourself and say, this is the idea, these are my options, this is the timeline, this is the way in which I can get it done. It allows you to be a little bit more objective with what you want. If you just let that idea fest in your mind, there's always going to be a subjective charge to it because you're like, oh, I feel good about this. And the next day I don't feel as good about this. But you don't actually become objective with it by, doing pros and cons of that idea or writing it down and giving yourself a timeline and seeing where that all fits in. So I think writing is really important. And then going for a walk or doing something that allows you to think about those options. And then again, writing or just thinking about them, but not in a sense of being really obsessed with it, but allowing a walk to kind of come and go. Because as you're walking, you're like, oh, this tree looks nice, or this thing looks nice, and okay, back to the problem. And then, oh, but this, should I turn left here or turn right here? Oh, I guess I'll turn right. And then you can go back to the problem. And I think it helps you to process it a lot better instead of allowing it to for you to kind of mentally obsess over it, and then you get stressed out over it, and then you just end up doing nothing.
I call that over chewing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to spit it out.
Yeah.
And just, let it go for a little bit. Because the brain, like you said, can't be on 100% RAM all the time, like we're humans. Mm-hmm. But our brain is very good at just like chilling out and letting the subconscious work. A lot of the creativity stuff is in that subconscious place, and let it be there. I sometimes think, or I plan my ideas of like rest to me is still work, but I'm making sure that my rest is something that rejuvenates me for the actual like 4 to 5 hours of like work that I actually need to do. And I think that's really important, that if you're going to have or be obsessed with something in the big picture form, that balance, that work-life balance, and having the life portion be something that rejuvenates you for your work and vice versa.
Yeah.
And having that positive loop is one of the big things that will keep you from burning out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
And that I don't think is like, if I were to tell my conservatory self something, that would be something that I would tell myself. It's like, you think about how you use your day, and how the conservatory or music school you attend already dictates what you have to do. So you have probably 4 hours of class minimum a day, and then you have to fit practice in. And then you're like, oh, I should have a social life. So you might go drinking with your friends. And then you expect the next day to be as productive or as good as the next. And then you're like, oh, I have a lesson coming up, so I better obsess over practicing this. And I'm like, how do you not expect yourself to burn out? And how do you not expect yourself to get injured or feel overwhelmed or feel depressed and just feel less than adequate? Because not only are you going to feel exhausted and fatigued, but then you're going to compare yourself to all the other people out there in your class or around you, and say, well, they're practicing so hard. How the heck are they doing it? So I should be doing it. So there's added guilt because you're comparing yourself to others. And so if I were to say something to my conservatory self, it's that you need to rest. You need to draw your boundaries well. You need to find time to actually not do anything. And it's so counterintuitive, because at school, everyone just looks like they're doing 6 to 7 hours a day. But are they actually doing really good 6 to 7 hours? And what are their goals? What are they actually aiming towards? And there's just so much you need to get done that you need to make sure you prioritize the time to rest. And if you don't rest well, you can't keep up. And if you can't keep up, then you feel less than adequate. And if you live in a city that is sort of like, dark from 4 p.m. till like 6 a.m. in the morning, then you're going to be depressed. You're going to feel awful about yourself. And when you feel awful about yourself, you're going to want to feel better. And a lot of the time that turns into like putting down others. Or you're going to put down yourself so much that you withdraw and retreat. And I think ultimately we need to know and learn better ways to handle this. Otherwise, you go out into the real world after you graduate and you find that these problems still haven't been fixed. It's just that perhaps now you have a job, or perhaps now you're just teaching full time, and you haven't really lived up to the potential that you want to live up to, or really found time to explore that. And that's why I think being back in Sydney for about almost 2 years now has allowed me to a bit more perspective and think about how I want to plan my days, my life. And a lot of that is just getting to know yourself. I think knowledge of self, knowing your limits, knowing whether you're an introvert or extrovert, and knowing when you are introverted and when you need that energy to recharge, and when you're feeling extroverted and you can actually go and have a great rehearsal with somebody and great collaborations and have a great conversation and connect. And when okay, guys, I need to go home. I need to go to bed. I'm sorry. Or like, oh, I'm not going out to dinner with you guys. I gotta do my thing. And I think those kind of boundaries are really important if you want to be happy and if you want to have to make the best use of your time in music school when you still don't have the burden and responsibility of having to develop your own career just yet.
Yeah. I love the advice that you're giving to your past self, and I think a lot of younger ones who are currently in university will relate to about like, oh, the comparison that forms into guilt and shame that comes in afterwards, because this is the classical music world and we have generational trauma of teaching that comes from guilt and shame and all that other stuff, which might be another podcast thing for another time. But I think as a creative, when you're in school and you're trying to figure out who you are as an artist, which is very similar to the social media stuff that we're talking about, because it's really just an extension of our creativity and our artistry in a way. It is. Number one thing, and this is something that I live by and I'm revisiting, honesty. Honesty. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself about the limits as a human being. How honest with like, how good is my playing right now and what can I actually do with it? Where am I in terms of all the ideas that I want, and can I like literally actually do 8 hours a day for like 7 days a week? Like, is that truly something that you can honestly do? Because if you're not honest with yourself, that's where the burnout comes from. That's where the guilt and shame comes from, the comparisons, the paralysis, all that stuff. And part of the things that keep me in my like honesty bubble and like facing the discomfort with that is reminding me of 2 3 things. One, because I'm like I'm working with this whole not living in like a black and white world but have a grayscale. I'm very much like all or nothing. So if I'm practicing, I'm 100% in practicing. Like all my focus is there, and then I go and do 100% focus elsewhere. But I have to remind myself 85%, Michelle. 85% is all you need, because I know my 100% is probably actually way overshot. 100%. I'm doing more than I need to. So when I'm toning it back down and I'm still not so obsessively chewing and gripping at something at my 85, I'm going to be able to practice better because I'm not as tight or whatever. Mentally, I'm a little bit more free, and it keeps me from burning out.
Honesty is incredibly important in not trying to compare yourself with others. Here's the thing. I think, at least I can speak from my personal experience, that in conservatory or in any sort of high performance arena, you're always going to compare yourself with others. You see someone getting an opportunity that you don't get, and you're like, oh, I must be worse than them. Or they win a competition, and you're like, oh, I must not be as good as them, that I didn't win. And it's like, we can talk about competitions as well, but it's like there's so many factors that you're completely unaware of between what they have and what you don't have. And what's really, really going to stabilize you is honesty about where you're at. It's honesty with your teacher about where you're at in your playing, and saying, look, I think I need an honest evaluation of where I'm at, where I need to improve upon, and where you think I genuinely need help with, or what I'm genuinely good at. Like, can you tell me what I'm good at? And a lot of that is like, if you have a good teacher, they'll tell you. But a lot of that is like listening to yourself and listening to your own recordings, and really not taking yourself too seriously, and knowing that, no, I am a process at work. Like, I am a work in progress, right? And I need to know where I'm at so that I know where to keep going forward. And if you're comfortable and knowledgeable about where you are, for example, I can say that perhaps I need to work on X and Y technique. Like, I'm not good at octaves, or I'm not really good at this. Like, I'm learning rotation, and like it's not really working. It's not really that comfortable. So therefore, it affects a lot of my passages. I get tense. If you know this stuff, and you know this stuff about yourself, you're less likely to compare yourself with others, because you're just going to compare yourself to yourself. And ultimately, that is going to make you so much happier, because when you do progress, you can say, oh, last year Chris or last year Michelle was not as good as this year, and I'm so glad I took all these steps to improve these parts, and I still know that these parts are not fully there yet, but I'm really working on it. And as a result, you feel more accomplished, and when people get opportunities, you're like, fair enough, they deserve it, right? They've got X, Y, and Z technique really well, or they've got these pieces which sound amazing, right? I'm still working on these pieces, but I know that I have all these strengths somewhere else. And you can celebrate their wins, and you can say, it's fine. I don't need this right now. I don't deserve it, because I genuinely not there yet. And sometimes you get lucky, and you go in a competition, or you win some audition, or something just really works out, or you go in a studio class and you play amazingly, and you're like, nice, that's cool, and you feel good about it. And then you don't say, oh, no, I'm not that good. No, like, oh, like, I'm just, yeah, it's okay. Yeah. And you're just honest. Yeah, thank you. I thought I improved here, and here. And I feel like this piece is getting much more comfortable. I'm happy with where it's at. Let me maybe take it to a competition somewhere, and let's go with it. But I still have all these other things I haven't worked on. All these other things are still there, and I acknowledge them. I can see them. And the next pieces I'm going to work on are going to target these issues that I may have. And being honest with yourself allows you not to compare yourself with others. It allows you a much more healthier mindset in approaching your practice. And ultimately, whether you get a win or not doesn't affect you as much, because, and this is the same with social media, because ultimately, it's a process. You know that you're just improving gradually in the process of becoming better and better every time. And then you kind of feel like, look, if they get an opportunity, good on them. I'm still going to work as hard. I'm still competitive, but I'm competitive in the sense that I want to just keep improving and be better than anybody else on my own terms. Not because I've put anyone else down, not because I've, or because, you know, they got lucky, or like that jury member likes them, you know, or they've studied with that jury member before, so of course they're going to get a win. You're not going to become bitter and resentful. And I think that's a really big lesson I wish I'd learned a lot earlier, because I think a lot of times there are like dark days in the dark days of conservatory, physically and metaphorically, because they were very dark in terms of the, you know, the sunlight not being
Some
around.
practice rooms don't have windows, okay?
Yeah, exactly. They're very dark, and
You know,
you just this
quite.
blue light, and you're just like, what am I doing here? And it's real. So that's been something that I wish I could impart to myself earlier, but I would love to impart to anybody else living in those dark conservatory days.
You had successfully touched upon the other two that I also want to talk about, and I want to like also add to it. When you're being honest with yourself, part of it is just purely objectivity. Take away all the emotions of whether you're happy about something or you feel guilty about something, but to really face yourself objectively without those emotions. What do I need to get done? What did I do good? What do I need to move forward? And then after that, make sure you engage in some form of positive self-talk or a positive progression.
Yeah.
Don't be like, oh, I'm not good at my octaves. And then you go into, oh, but so is better, and I've been working at it for like hours a day, and it's not coming. You're putting yourself down, but then rather something positive can be, who can I seek for help to get better? What can I do tomorrow that might help me? What can I experiment with? And engaging that curiosity so it keeps you in your lane, because you're not going to be in someone else's lane. You're not going to take their progress or at the speed at which they're traveling, whether it's fast or slow, it doesn't matter. Your progress is your progress. Your only competition is with yourself. And the other thing that I really loved that you touched upon was the idea of like the long game. If you're a creative, and unfortunately, like as a creative, you can't, once you discover you're a creative, you can't not be a creative ever. It is your life.
Yeah.
And it's the long game. So you need to be able to balance between like the fast productivity and the slow productivity. The fast productivity being like, what can I get done in this day? How can I make sure that there's less friction, there's more efficiency? What can I do to make something's better? But also remember the slow productivity in the sense like, in 2 years' time, I want to have, 20 videos out. And of those 20, this is going to happen. What's my long game? So then you don't feel like you have to make those 20 videos in the next month, because as creatives, you just get bogged down with all your ideas and you need to get them out. But you can remind yourself, oh, I have 2 years to get those 20 videos out. Maybe I'll just focus on one this month and then add a little bit of fast productivity. How can I make it a little easier? How can I get a ring light or things like that? And it's that balance that I find has also been really helpful in terms of work-life balance and mental health balance.
Yeah. I really recommend this, so Gary Vee or Gary Vaynerchuk has been huge in sort of helping me with these ideas. He's like, incredible. A lot of things he says is based upon incredible patience for anything, whether it's investments or any project, incredible patience, empathy towards others, which is, really helpful, especially when you have a business and you're relating to with others and feeling there's a competitiveness to it. And one thing that, trust the process is another big one of his. And also I think it's important to realize that, we're really young. Like everyone listening to this is young. Like, and this, we're going to probably live for like such a long time because of advances in medicine and everything. But what's important isn't like sort of how long you live, but it's the fact that we have a long path ahead of us. Like I look back upon the things that I was doing last year, and I've advanced so much in terms of the kind of tech and everything I'm using, the editing and everything, and it's realizing that we can accomplish a lot, and we are going to accomplish a lot. But if you're not patient with the process, then you're going to feel like you want the whole world now. And if you want the whole world now, it's not going to happen because you're forcing it. You don't deserve it. You don't have the capability. Even if someone to give you the whole world right now, you wouldn't know what to do with it. And so it's being really patient and realizing that it's such a beautiful process of just being consistent, showing up, doing the work, and gradually improving, so that by the time you get to, 500,000 followers or whatever your metric is to define that success, not only are you ready for it, but you feel like that doesn't matter to you because there's something else beautiful at work. And that next year, you're going to improve in all these other ways. And the year after, you're going to do all these other things. And it's just definitely the same as for a musician. Because if you think that you have to be a Beethoven, Ravel, Chopin, Rachmaninoff, and Prokofiev specialist, next week, and you're going to play all these pieces at the highest level, and you're going to be better than, Trivanov and Yuja, and, you'll play with all the orchestras in the world. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that might not be the thing that's right for you. Yeah, and it might not happen next year. And if you define success in those terms, you're going to get really hard on yourself, and you're going to feel really bad when it doesn't happen. And so I think the important thing is to realize it's a long game, and that it's a beautiful long game. So everything that happens daily is part of the process, and it's a really wonderful gift. And so as a result, if, for example, a composer comes up to you saying, I love your work, would you like to play my pieces? You're not going to be like, no, sorry, I'm only a Beethoven specialist. I'm going to be a Ravel specialist, Prokofiev specialist, I'm not going to play that stuff. You don't know, of course, I'd love to play your work. And then your career may blossom through just playing a bunch of contemporary composers' works and, showcasing them.
You might even find out you love contemporary stuff.
Exactly.
And champion that.
Yeah, and and then you can still play Ravel, still play Beethoven, still play Rachmaninoff, and you don't have to be a specialist. I think we try too hard to mimic people who are our mentors and our teachers, and we feel like, I want to be like Rubinstein, or I don't think none of them set out to be a specialist in anything. I think they just set out to be the best that they could be every day, and to hone that process. And it just so happened, Brendel, okay, I ended up playing all of Beethoven's works and recording all of it. Okay, so it happened. And so now they call me a Beethoven specialist. All right, I guess I'll take it. But I'm not just playing Beethoven. I play all these other stuff too. And I have a lot to say as I write and I teach and I spread my knowledge. And I think throughout lifetime, people will give you the labels. Like, people will give you the recognition that you either deserve or you don't deserve. But if you chase after these labels, it's so hard, and it makes your life more miserable. I think it's more important that you pursue the process and living out that process and being open-minded to what is available to you. I think the most successful people want certain things, want to succeed, but they are also open to the possibility of life throwing them different things and then embracing them. And I think that's what makes people happy to continue on this process and not want to retire, because it's such an open-ended thing. They never feel like they've really arrived, but they don't want to arrive. The journey is the best part.
Yeah, I absolutely totally agree with that, and especially the idea about chasing labels, because at the end of the day, if you're going to chase labels, you're chasing basically something that someone else gives to you that makes it easy for them to define who you are because they put you in a box. But there is no human out there that can be defined and put into one box. Beyond being like, oh, I play Beethoven, I play Ravel, I play Debussy, I play all those stuff, you are also a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, a pianist, a snowboarder, a photographer. Like, at the end of the day, love your process and be authentic in that process. Who cares whatever people label you? If they label you something, great. If you don't like it, great. If you like it, great. Doesn't matter. Just stay on your path. And one other thing that someone has told me, because I'm quite a impatient person, so you're talking about patience is a good reminder for myself too, is I always felt like I never had enough time, or I wanted things to happen instantly. I want my 20 videos right now because I have it all planned in my head and I just want it instantly. And he had said to me, well, if it happened instantly, everything in your life that you wanted, it all happened instantaneously, how are you going to enjoy it?
Yep.
Because life's done. Born and dead, just like that.
Yep.
And we're given that gift of life because we get to enjoy the process. So don't go messing with the process that is inherent in nature. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, that's really funny how we do that. I think, there's a tendency to want the achievements and to feel like that's what defines you. But what's more brutal is actually what defines you is how you do the process, how you live the process.
Yes.
And I think that's why you got to go back to the fundamental principles of who you are, knowing who you are, and then realizing you need to continue to be, kind to others throughout the whole path. Being kind to others is huge. Like if you're not like it's the same for like the reason Emmanuel Axe gets to work with so because he's such a nice guy, and you are like. Isaac Perlman gets all these contracts and he plays incredibly, but it's also a really nice guy, and all these really great nice people end up getting a lot of really great concerts, and over time it builds up. And realizing that that's super important. And so if you're putting others down, if you're saying other like crap things, and I've been there, so I'm saying this from experience. Like I was really insecure at some point in my life, and putting down others is really an easy way to make yourself feel better. But ultimately, the problem with that is you could be talking crap about others 1 second, and then the next moment, someone else could be talking crap about you. And when people talk crap about you, you're like, oh, how could they? And then you feel so insecure, and it just multiplies. So I think it's important to not to find ways to not feel so insecure, and part of that is obviously honesty and not comparing yourself to others and realizing that you're a part of the process. And also the other fundamental principle is the fact that I think our job, especially in a sort of quote unquote dying industry, which I don't think it's dying, but people call it dying. But so let's take it for what they call it, is that we more than ever need to be incredibly good to others and try to build our industry. That throughout technological advancements, through social media, through everything that we do, we try to raise awareness of the beauty of the art that we do. If we are so focused on certain achievements and putting down others, or whatever it is that we do that is so focused on so insular, then we forget the bigger important thing, which is to grow our industry. We want more people coming to concerts. We want people to really appreciate music. So the reason I love what two-step violin does is because even my non-musician friends are like, oh, I watched this video of two-step violin, it's so cool. And and it's that grows, and they find out more about Beethoven or Sibelius or Tchaikovsky. And then when they hear a concert of Tchaikovsky and Sibelius, they're like, oh, I remember that fact, that melody. I remember Brett and Eddie talking about that. That's really cool. I can hear that now. And so our job as musicians, especially in an industry that is of such a long age and so much tradition, is to make sure that it continues to prosper. Like we want more people in audiences, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're in an audience in a concert hall. They could be watching online, or they could be watching via Twitch, and they could tip us as they're watching. We want the industry to prosper, and so that means that it matters that we're getting our own income and that we have our own standing and recognition, but it also matters that other people are getting the recognition that they deserve. And so that's another fundamental principle I discovered earlier on, that the more we become insular and start to put other organizations down or other individuals down, we're not helping our industry. The thing that we need to do, and the reason I don't want to just teach at home all the time, is because I want to help our industry grow. I want it to reach more audiences, and that our audience is getting older for a reason, because less and less people are appreciating what we do. And the way our society is designed is that they're not going to want to sit for 25 minutes listening to like a Chopin sonata or a big long Schumann work or any sort of big sonata. They're going to want something quick, 5 minutes, and move on. That's the kind of tendency. So how do we engage people to really appreciate a 25-minute, 30-minute, 40-minute work? We're going to have to slowly not just educate, but engage them and allow them and make it accessible, make it beautiful, and allow them to see and hear and feel what it means to live this kind of music. Because I think ultimately this music reaches deep down in our human condition. It says, hey, this is not just happy music, or this is not just sad music. This is deep music. This is music that dives into the depths of our subconscious and stirs up emotions that we didn't really know existed. And it talks about narrative of suffering, of grief, of deep mourning, of deep struggle. And unless you recognize that, the music isn't really going to touch you, because you don't really get it. But if you do, that's why people can listen to Wagner operas become spellbound for hours. I still can't do that. But people become spellbound by Wagner because they realize it dives deeper in them, and they get into a meditative state listening to it, because it just touches upon something, a part of their subconscious or their conscious mind, that nothing else does. It's beautiful. It's beyond beautiful. It touches something deep in their recesses of emotion that they don't really know how to express. And I think as musicians who have the ability to play some of this music, like Chopin's Third Sonata is an incredible example of just the variety of emotions and storytelling and colors that you go through. We have the ability to play this music and to share it with others. So our duty is not to try to get more recognition. I think our duty is to try to make this music accessible, make this music understandable, and make this music deeply felt and portray it as well as we can for others so that they can feel it as well, and that they have an experience where they feel that they're understood, that someone relates to them in their deep trouble. And like the last movement of that sonata is a great example of something where there's like victory, devastation, triumph, and struggle, immense struggle. And our whole life, our whole existence is one of such struggle that we need music and art to help us to express it and help us to feel that we're not alone. And I think I'm touching on something quite deep, but I think if we can achieve these things,
continue. I love this stuff.
If we can like achieve these things in our art and show that, then people will actually want to listen to this music more. Because as good as a lot of the music that's coming out is, this is still part of our human history, and that the sufferings and the pain and the all the emotions from heartbreak to loss, tragedy, and especially now we have this conflicts in Ukraine and Russia. These are relatable emotions that the composers in our past have felt and somehow have found the harmonic and melodic medium to express. And so it's always relevant. It's always something that we deeply feel. And I think it's our duty in our industry to try to make this as accessible to others as possible so that people who listen can feel something. And they come home knowing that they are understood, and someone also feels the same, and they feel that they're not alone. You think about why people want to watch movies, and the most beautiful movies are the ones that for some reason touch upon so many different things that we all feel deep inside, but we have never really kind of explored. But it's nice and really beautiful knowing that someone else has gone through it. And we're attracted to stories, we're attracted to narrative, and we're attracted to all these things because it's part of who we are. And I think our art in particular has the ability to tap into that. And the more that we can help others tap into that, the more I think we can help others feel more human. And I think that's why we do what we do.
I think that is, hopefully for most musicians, that is what we do.
I think that's why Shakespeare has such a longevity. I think that's why, like, if we talk about different arts, like the stories of Dostoevsky.
These stories and art are all timeless because all these emotions that we have as humans are timeless. I mean, we're going to have cycles of war, of happiness, of conquer, and no matter who you are in what era, you're going to find some relation in that music. And I'm wondering that as we're thinking about making our music more accessible to others, and I know that you have big plans for that, is social media part of that plan for you?
I'm hoping so. So I'm exploring this idea of narration. I want to be able to find something really tasteful to do where I can play or demonstrate a piece by Beethoven, but tell a story with it. And so it's not like a masterclass per se, but it's a way to understand what's happening. And I want to open it up. So the reason I think, I've been experimenting with this. I think the reason I fell in love with music is because my amazing teacher, John Perry, sat down and was playing music, like showing me different excerpts of pieces by Brahms or Beethoven. And as he's playing, he's telling a story. So he'll sit down and demonstrate, oh, this was happening here, and then listen to this, and you don't want to, play this too fast. You want to keep it to rhythm because this part is where you want to slow down. And this is the color you want to highlight here. And as he's playing, you're hearing it and the story is going. And then you just fall in love with the piece because you understand it now. And I remember like sort of the masterclasses of like someone like Leon Fleischer, and he's guiding you through it. It's like, oh, not yet. now play, and like the rests have to be just a little bit longer than you think, not too long, but just long enough so that you feel that there's some suspension. And he describes music as physics because it's this feeling that you want with time, and time is very closely related to physics. And so you want this sort of, as you're listening to music, a feeling that there's suspension, and then there's a ground, and you're up again, and there's a ground, and that's pulse ultimately, which is why pulse and rhythm is different, because you can be very rhythmical but you can have no pulse. But you could be, but if you have pulse, then you feel like you're breathing together, then there's this sort of this cycle of being on a journey with one another. And I think the greatest players are able to take you on such a wild ride of their music, and the music kind of ends before you realize it, because they have such an incredible sense of pulse that they're taking you on this journey. And the pulse isn't always the same throughout the whole piece. It's there's like variance. Sometimes it's a bit slower, but then he guides you back into it going forward again, and there's like a little time to take before going in. And I want to use social media as a way to portray that. I think that can be such a powerful way for people to understand it, and it can be very meaningful, because how else are you going to know how to understand the music we play? If you okay, let's just use that. If you force someone to listen to a symphony that they've never heard before, and it could be let's say, for the sake of this example, that it is a Beethoven symphony. Let's use the Third Symphony, and it's an incredible symphony, and it's already very accessible from the get-go, right? You're starting with these loud chords, and it just goes. You're on the horse carriage, and you're going forward. If you use that example, and you open up the world to how everything works, but not in a very technical way, but more in a storytelling way, then every time they listen to it, there's more that they can feel, because you already kind of outlined the structure of what they're supposed to understand. And then you show them the underlying sort of message behind it, or the reason why, the recapitulation is so good, because you don't know when it's coming back, and suddenly it does come back, and or for example, in the Seventh Symphony, it's incredible how he keeps teasing the entry of the main theme after the introduction. You don't know when it's going to start, and he uses it that kind of rhythm, but it's kind of sparse at first, and then it suddenly comes, and then everything kind of transitions out. If you can tell a story with that, if you can demonstrate how Beethoven is kind of using rhythm to tease you, or kind of like let you feel unsettled, and finally you land, it's magical. It's magical. It'll give you goosebumps. It'll give you goosebumps. And I think that's the thing that's kind of missing in our kind of music education, on a broader level. Now, I'm not targeting teachers, but it's like on a broader level, it's like we need to show our students and people listening that there's a bigger narrative at hand. And the reason why these moments are so special throughout the piece is because of all the surrounding structures that are slowly leading to these moments, which are so beautiful. And then everything becomes like tension and release. There's a narrative, and then a lack of narrative, or there is and the use of silence, for example, is so powerful because there was so much said before, and suddenly there's nothing. And so I don't know, and I've been experimenting with that with my concerts. I've been trying to say, okay, so this is the structure of the piece. I'm going to demonstrate each little bit, and I'm going to show you what, when you hear this melody or when you hear this happening, this is what's actually happening. Like with the Chopin Barcarolle, I tell a story behind it. I give it's a kind of a silly-ish story, but it's not silly in the sense that it's still kind of very operatic. Like it's a very operatic love story kind of thing. But I tell a story. Look, I'm like, you can decide your story, but this is my way of this is a story. And hopefully you can add your own variants to it, but you can actually kind of feel like you're along with me on the story. And you can understand that when the lilting rhythm changes, then there's a slightly different drift in the current, or you're in different waters. Like in the beginning, you're in the canals, and there's a part where it gets a little bit more rocky, and then you're like in the ocean part of Venice, like where you're out in the open seas a little bit more, But ultimately, you end, and you're back into the canals, and it's all peaceful again. So there's all these little imageries that you can bring in with rhythm that I think ultimately would tell a story. And I want to learn and experiment with social media to illustrate these things. It's gonna be hard, but I think one of the first steps is allowing people to trust you. And I think that's huge, because you want your community to trust that the video you're going to put out, they actually want to watch from beginning to end, and you're going to take them on a journey, and that they trust you to take them on that journey. And I think that's huge. That's actually really hard, because you need to use a combination of good editing, good storytelling, good scripting. There's so many things that's a part of that. But I want to do that. I think that's going to scale up the ideas I already have for my concerts into a bigger audience. And ultimately, like I said, the fundamental principles of like, we need to help our industry grow. We want to get more people into concert halls, to learning music, into festivals. And a part of that is actually just doing our jobs really well and spreading the word, spreading the message about how beautiful this thing could be.
I think it's a really, not only is it a tall order in a good way, but I think your idea about storytelling is so important, because storytelling is so innate in us as humans.
Mm-hmm.
We have stories since like the dawn of time. Even all the art on like our caveman drawings and all that stuff is all storytelling. And social media, anything that's viral and that will grab you, is a story. So I think there is going to be a very big development for you as you start to find your voice in this world of storytelling, whether it's going to be through short form, long form documentaries, movies, or even doing what you're doing in performances and walking through the themes and then actually just putting it into some version of like that, and you're experimenting. You're definitely going to find it, and I'm so excited for you.
Well, let's see how it goes. It's a process. Like, you know, like it's one thing to say all these things, and it's another thing to actually, you know, execute. I think currently...
Chris, trust the process. You tied this back
Oh.
earlier. Don't put yourself down.
Thank you for
trust
that.
the process.
Thank you for that piece of advice. Oh, that I just...
And maybe our advice should be listen to one's own advice.
Yeah, that's a huge part. That's a huge part. Which is why I think writing is important, because, or at least, I don't know about you, but I think part of what's beautiful about going on walks, or finding time to be in solitude, is the ability to be able to talk to oneself and realize that a lot of the best ideas or conversations and the things that you need, you already know.
You have to give yourself space to hear yourself.
Yeah, like you have to be able to find that. So, which I don't think it has something to do with being introverted, but it's more to do with the fact that you need to be able to face yourself, and you need to have that connection between yourself, your thoughts, your anxieties, your worries, and your ambitions and goals. And one of the best people to talk to about that is yourself. You know, and ideally you want to know
yourself the best.
You're
so
supposed
you
to.
have no choice.
You're supposed to. Like that's like you're like that's the ideal. Like that's the ideal. If you get to know yourself really well, sometimes you need the help of others. Sometimes you need the help of people who look from the outside and tell you, no. This is who you are because I've watched you, you know, progress and develop, and this is who you are. Don't forget that. But a lot of the time, you can discover those things just by a lot of reflection. And I think the best ideas come when you are authentic with knowing who you are, and then outside influences just inspire you, and you feel like I can join all these dots together. And I don't know where you feel like where you get your epiphanies, but a lot of my epiphanies for programming and ideas come actually when I'm listening to a concert. And I really enjoy the concert, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool how they did this and I did that. And then things just start coming through because you're still engaged in this creative, like you never stop working. Like your mind never stops joining the dots together. It's just about giving yourself the most fertile ground to be able to do that. And I think everyone's different. Sometimes for me, it's like, you know, sitting at a cafe and just kind of people watching, or when I'm on a bus or on a train and just kind of like mindlessly watching the landscape go by, and then suddenly like certain things just connect. And I think we have to give ourselves the ability to do that, which goes back to my original what I said about like maxing out my day and realizing that that's not going to work. And now it's giving myself that time to limit options for example, one thing that I think is really useful for me is instead of doing my errands and my admin stuff at my computer at home, I said, okay, I've got emails to do. I'm going to get my iPad and my phone and a book and go to a cafe or a park, sit down and just do that. Like limit the things that I can do so that I can just focus on getting these things done. All right, and I feel like when I can get these things done, then I'm accomplished. Whereas if you give yourself too many things that are available at your disposal, like if I have my computer, I could edit. If I have my computer, I could do this, do this. I have like a whole incredible list of things I could do, and then you just never get started because you're like, I don't know where to begin. But if you kind of limit those things that are possible, then I think you're able to focus on those things well and not get distracted, and hopefully accomplish a few more things for the day.
Yeah, definitely. I think one important thing about limiting is that it also gives you that space so that you can focus and that you can also meet with yourself. Otherwise, you're just overwhelmed with all these different things. And I want to go back a little bit to that idea where when sometimes you are supposed to know yourself the best, but sometimes people will tell you who you are. I rather, not to offend you or anything, but I disagree with that a little bit. Because at the end of the day, you're with yourself all the time, and it doesn't matter how much someone says that they know you. They're at the end of the day, they are reading an interpretation of you, which is going to be construed in some way in their mind, and then spitting it back out, which you're going to interpret differently. But rather, what I find is if I'm trying to find or meet with myself through others, is I try to find the voice that picks up on the mirrors, because that's the thing that it says, oh, I met this person who seems to really like movies too. I must really enjoy movies as well. That's that inner voice that tells you who you are, and you can't have that inner voice or hear it until you find that space for it. In the same way, when you're people watching and you notice something that happens, or someone speaks a certain way and they're like, oh, that seems kind of rude, it teaches you a little bit, oh, that person mirrored the fact that I don't like speaking that way because I think it's rude. And then you can go into like an inner spiral of like whatever it is that you want. But yes, limiting your options is important to give you the space to meet with yourself so you can have those creative ideas and to objectively be honest with what you can and cannot do. And maybe you can and cannot do right now, but over a long period of time, you can definitely find the time and place for it and enjoy the process. Sure.
It's very interesting that so the thing I want to explore is like, okay, so how much self-knowledge can you gain from asking those people who are closest to you, like really good friends, what and who you are? Like how much can you find out about that? I think it's very, out of curiosity, I think that's a very good question to ask,
Yes.
For example,
I'm not saying don't listen to what people label you as, but still reflect on it. Don't always take it for truth.
That's absolutely, no, that's absolutely true. Because I think there are people who are very self-aware and they understand, where they're at. But a lot of people don't recognize how long they've been stuck in a certain state of thinking or a certain mode of thinking. And so, especially when you're developing yourself as an artist or as a person or getting to know yourself, it's very useful to have other people share with you perhaps the things that they see as a kind of thing you need to work on, or things that you do really well. For example, it's really, I'm always curious to know what my friends, think of what I do best, or where my strengths are at, where are things I'm weak at. And it's not to take their word, as truth, because they could be wrong. And they could really misunderstand, like they say, oh, you're always late. It's like, well, yeah, that's true. But it's because I have this incredible, like, I'm stuck. Like, I want to make sure everything's perfect. I'm a bit OCD, so I make sure everything is like, closed and shut down before I can leave. So I have this paralyzing thing that I do. So they could tell you one aspect, but they don't know the underlying issues. But I think it's important to, as a process, because a lot of the time you don't realize how long you've been stuck in a certain thing or how long you've been unaware of a certain thing. And you need other people who have a more of an objective eye to tell you, hey, I care about you a lot, but you're not like
Here are your blind spots.
your rhythm sucks, or like you're like
Yes.
your and it's the same with performances. You need somebody who's like sitting in the concert hall to tell you, oh, balance is a bit off, the sound is a little bit this and that, and you're like, oh yeah, that's because blah 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 blah. Okay, cool, thank you. Right? And I think it's obviously, it's never so black and white as like just trust your friends and never listen to yourself, or just listen to yourself and don't trust your friends. And I don't think you're saying that either, but it's just like there's a beauty in asking the people who care about you and know you very well certain things that you can work on. And I think it helps develop the relationship even further when you can be that honest with one another, because it says that I trust you and I put my ego into your hands, and you tell me in the most caring way and honest way you can where you think that there are some deficiencies in my character that I could work on. And ultimately, this serves to help our friendship, this serves to help our relationship, but this serves to also help me grow as a person for society and the community that we're in. This is obviously a bit sidetracked from like being an artist and musician, more of like being a person.
I think it's actually quite intertwined, but yeah, continue.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but it's like that's something that I think about a bit, because we do need the help of others, but we should not.
Humans are social creatures.
Yeah.
You can't get anything done without one another.
Yeah, but we shouldn't like our ego and our reputation or our impression of ourselves should not hang on what others think of us. At the same time, we do need to know what others think of us, especially the ones we care about, because that will inform us on where we can improve and continue to grow. And I think it does, yeah, it's always a balancing act. Everything is a bit of a balance, and you don't want to rely solely on what your friends think, but you also need to have the awareness that you are sometimes blind to some of the things that you may be deficient, or you don't want to acknowledge it, or you feel like, yeah, I'll fix it later. Like, oh, yeah, it's fine, and then a friend might be, no, you got to deal with it. Like, this is an issue. Like, if you don't deal with it now, something's going to come up, and they just raise the awareness a little bit higher so that you feel like, no, okay, fine. Yeah, you're right. I've got to deal with it. Right. And you begrudgingly like, okay, I'll fix it up. And I think
that's also being honest with yourself too.
Yeah.
Be able to also accept the criticism and really look at yourself objectively. Like, yeah, it is true what you're saying, and thank you for caring about me so much.
Yeah.
That, you would tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good exploration of stuff. And I think that's something that I've been really thinking about more recently. This sort of mini sabbatical after my studies, and then now going into my sort of development professionally, to have this beautiful time to reflect on myself, my past, my present, and where I want to go, as well as just knowing myself a lot better and knowing my weaknesses and knowing where there are times when, the option paralysis and how to manage that, burnout and trying to do too much, and always trying to meet people's expectations and or over meet their expectations, and where does that come from? It's a lot to explore, I think.
It is, and you have all the time in your lifetime to explore that. So remember, be patient with your progress.
Yes, trust the process.
Trust the process.
Rewind and listen to your own advice. Yeah.
I think you are highly self-aware. You're definitely a thinker. You have huge ideas. So I'm really excited to see what you're going to grow into in your authentic playground that is your social media and in the world. I'm sure anyone who's listening to this conversation will really want to go and find you. So where can they find you? What are your socials?
My socials are chris.ao.piano on Instagram. I'm on YouTube as well, just Chris Ao Piano, and I'm also I have a website, sort of semi-blog / just things.
Read his blogs; they're really good.
I just chuck stuff in there. Like the blog is like, it's funny because the reason I think I might develop TikTok eventually a bit more, like I find the right time to do it, is because it's nice to have a platform where nobody knows you, and you can just chuck things on there, like knowing that people who like your friends aren't going to really read it, or people aren't really going to, or even if they do, you're unaware of it. And so like the blog is that platform. I think TikTok is that platform too, because I don't know, I don't have that many friends on TikTok. But that sounds sad. No, I don't have any friends that I know who are on TikTok who are following me. Whereas Instagram is like a lot of my friends and people who have started to get to know me and etc. And so yeah, so those are like the primary ways to find me. I'm working more on Instagram recently because I want to find a way to understand it more. And it's a process, like even just coming with the idea that, it's very much to do with aesthetics is a realization more recently. And I've been trying to figure out a lot of different things. I think each social media platform has their own rules and like its own game. And it's really hard to figure it all out in the beginning. And so you got to pick one. You got to pick one to really like hone into. And then once you kind of figure out one, then you kind of like, okay, now I feel like I understand how it works. I can go into another one and figure that one out. And then you can kind of link the fans and followers from one to the other. I think a lot of people more recently just went all in on TikTok. But then they realized that they want to do longer form videos, and so therefore their TikTok links into their YouTube, and so like soon the followers who are following them on TikTok will go into the YouTube, and you can develop them there, and you can probably do a lot more monetization through YouTube.
100%.
I'm not there yet, but I know it to be somewhat true for some people. So hopefully that becomes part of the growth.
Yeah, I think it's definitely in your cards in that growth if that's where you choose to go for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this lovely conversation. Lots of words of wisdom and insight, I think, for everybody. And so I hope we can have another wonderful conversation like this again. Maybe on IG Live.
Absolutely. Would love to.
Yeah.
Anytime you need anything. I really appreciate your work. And I think you're at a stage where I think it's just blossoming. You're like still working on it, I know, but it's blossoming, and it's really cool to see people who are so knowledgeable about the art of this social media thing, but also really deeply in love with classical music and trying to figure it out. I don't know that many pianists who are actually doing as much as you are, and so
they're not all as crazy as I am, that's why.
Well, there might not be. It's different kind of crazy, I think everyone has their own crazy tendencies, but I really appreciate the work that you do, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this podcast.
Thank you very much. Let's go and train these social media beasts together.
Okay, sounds good.
Conquer them all.
well, yeah, that'll be really cool. It'll be really cool because, like, if you think about like the whole span of history, especially like you said this before, like classical music content creators is like we're like the pioneers in that area. Like apart from maybe like Ray Chen, who did a lot of that before we did. It's like this is such a new arena, and it's kind of interesting that a lot of the Gen Z and also people younger are going to really want to be content creators. Like a lot of them will want to like explore this and make it bigger. And even Mr. Beast was talking about like how he still feels YouTube is still young, that there's a lot more to grow with YouTube. And so I'm really curious to know how it continues to grow. So it gives a bit more kind of perspective that it's not too late to join. It's not too late to start working on it. It's not too late to start exploring it. And if your niche, for example, is just photos, if your niche is just to write a blog, that's okay too. There's so many options for you to explore, which I think is really incredible. You don't have to show your face. You can just show other parts of your process. Like a lot of pianists don't even show their face. It's just their keyboard and their hands, and then that's it. And so you can, there's a lot of flexibility and versatility in the way we explore it. So yeah, it's gonna be really exciting to see what happens in the future.
I think so. Even as you said, with YouTube being young, I mean, it is quite a bit older compared to TikTok and Instagram, but I also think that there are waves in every generation, and you just got to catch that wave and ride it and enjoy it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you again very much. Lovely conversation.
My pleasure.
And I hope we can talk again.
Yes, absolutely. We will talk again. I'm sure of it.
Yes.